I want to say very briefly that the Electoral Act of 2026 is like the national anthem of 2023. Everybody knows about the national anthem, but they don't know the lyrics. And it was designed for the purpose of creating confusion. And you notice that in Nigeria, whenever you find an Electoral Act designed by the ruling party, it is meant to correct a problem that they couldn't overcome the last time. The problem this time is that the presidential candidate of the APC doesn't have a qualification. And the Electoral Act was designed, I'm talking about Tinubu now, the Electoral Act was designed to cure that flaw because there's no way they can find his certificate. There's no way they can find his qualification. And as a result, I have a problem with the political parties. You have a problem in your hands about the Electoral Act. You carry yourself to a banquet in the Aso Rock Villa to go and appeal to the guy who designed the electoral law in the first place. What do you want him to do? To help you defeat the electoral law that was designed to help him continue his illegality in office. If the electoral law says somebody must qualify before they become president, there's no way Tinubu will be qualified to contest the next election. So why are you here deceiving yourselves? The second aspect is that these booby traps in the Electoral Act were done to give lawyers and our courts the opportunity to prolong our suffering. This is an electoral law for lawyers and the courts. But serious democracies, yes. You already know, we are carpenters, but we are lawyers. You already know that a lot of provisions of the Electoral Act violates the Nigerian Constitution. And wherever the Constitution provisions are violated, the Constitution is superior to an Electoral Act. Why are we arguing here? Why should we go to a court to interpret to us a Constitution that all of you have in your houses? And you know that the judges will keep dragging us until the candidate of their choice is brought back as president again, whether it's qualified or not. That is what I want to submit. Professor Mayaki, I thank you very much for your submission here today. The country was designed so that people who know nothing governs the country. Not people, and you have seen it. I get insulted every day that I should go to the local government. And the question I ask, if I go to the local government, who is going to be the president of your country? Why should the country have decent people, intellectuals, people who are able to run the country, all of you here? But the irony is that the people who are going to run the country are in the next room collecting form. For people, wait, the people who are collecting the forms are not even the people contesting. We saw them on our way here. But the decent people in this room, none of you are going to collect form. Yes, except you. And me too. And me too. And I'm never going to settle for less. I'm going for the presidency of the country so that this country can achieve progress, peace, and prosperity. Thank you very much.
The Interparty Advisory Council met and had a resolution. We had to look at the present 2026 Electoral Act as it is, and we picked out some of the provisions that are inimical to the progress of Nigerian democracy today. And we made a presentation. Very aptly, we had a banquet with the president. Somehow, the chairman presented these issues to the president of the country, and his response was more or less a disheartening one. I must say it here. We never expected the kind of response we had from him. We expected that, at least if not for any other thing, he will accommodate the concerns of political parties and then see how the ruling party, being the majority in the National Assembly, will go ahead to accommodate our concerns. But lo and behold, his response was far from it, and it is quite not acceptable. So based on that, the issues before us, we have political party processes. I think the Electoral Act has actually set out, maybe let me say before now that the learned professor had actually x-rayed all the areas that were listed herein. Mine is just to maybe add one or two things to make it up. Then we are talking about political party processes. Well, that is not something that, from the Electoral Act, I know that there are processes for electoral participation in Nigeria, for you to join in practices of a political or being a politician, so to say. So the Electoral Act made that clear. But my interest will be that of internal democracy within the political parties. And first and foremost, I know that all the political parties in Nigeria, as it were today, have their constitutions. And these constitutions are made so that the internal democracy of political parties will be accommodated or will be achieved. And what do we call internal democracy? It is transparency. It is to accommodate. It is to hear the voice of ordinary members, to appreciate their voices within the political setting of that political party. And if the processes of, and then also inclusivity. And now maybe I should veer off to say that inclusivity is not just the main political actors as we men, but it has to be that of the women and the young people. So, and I know that in recent times, like my own party, we have a kind of formula to make sure that participants, political participants, are accommodated. Like for the women, we have a kind of 30% that every member of the party should, or offices of the party should leave out for women and people living with disabilities and young people. So all this cumulates into what we could talk about regarding internal democracy and giving the political parties the opportunity to elect their members, the aspirants, and the candidates. Very importantly, I would want to mention...
1 more minute, sir.
Really, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sir. I would want to mention a particular issue that has to deal with... Is it the last time I'm going to talk so that I can make reservation for another time? Or just this is an opening session?
You still have the bite, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. On that note, I think I will end here. Maybe when next I'll have to pick, I'll bring out the other arsenals that I have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello. Thank you so very much for the opportunity to share my perspectives on this very important topic predicated on political party processes. I've listened very carefully to the submissions made by my learned brother of the Silk, and I'm convinced that he has covered all the field, and I wish there was part of the modalities to allow me align myself completely with the submission and just sit back. It's not possible, Mr. Chairman. Okay, thank you. Let me add to the very beautiful presentation by my learned brother Silk. I'd like to provide a foundational intervention, and the perspective from where I'm going to come relates to civic participation. And I'm going to talk from the perspective of a player in the industry currently serving as a member of one of the subnational legislatures. Now, the truth of the matter is that we had a dislocation in 1999 when we returned to democracy, and at that point, those that were supposed to step in and take over the realms of leadership developed lethargy and sat back. The truth of the matter is that as we speak today, there is a capture, and those that should be led are actually leading. Now, the entire spectrum of our political landscape is dominated by persons who should actually be listening to others, who should actually be at the back seat. And you will find that a lot of the questions that the previous presentation raised were questions that would have actually been answered in the affirmative if we had the right set of people on the saddle. And I say this because a lot of the people that I speak to every day who talk from the comfort of their bedrooms or talk from their social gatherings talk about a change they desire. They talk about a status, as a political status quo or a democratic situation they desire, but actually do not walk the talk. As long as we maintain that trajectory, where all we do is sit down and talk, and where the political class, the working class, the intelligentsia, and those of us that actually know, sit back and just talk, and not do a bit of visit to the courts and the custodial centers like my brother Sowore, a lot will not change. And I say this with every sense of responsibility. I sit in a State House of Assembly, and every day I watch and listen. The day I made the decision to take over the chance to walk the talk, to participate and run elections, the first banton I received were from members of this class who felt that having become a professor, having become a senior advocate of Nigeria, what the hell are you doing in the State House of Assembly? And the answer to me, that I gave was simply that there is a huge void that requires to be filled. And except we step out to provide the kind of leadership that we desire, we will continue to be led by those that we don't desire. And this I'm experiencing in my everyday life as a legislator, because what I find is that I'm a lone ranger in the midst of strangers, and every day I understand even the more reason why the questions that were raised for determination by my learned brother Silk may not be answered in the affirmative. Because the reality is that we are confronted by a situation where we have square pegs struggling to fit into round holes. Now, with that as my opening remark, I want to then speak about internal democracy. Now, internal democracy is supposed to serve as a foundation for our global democracy, because it is a microcosm of the experimentation that we expect from players who would eventually emerge at the global platform. Now, how do we expect that, from a crop of people who are unable to demonstrate internal democracy from the party level to do any better when they eventually get elected? Now, this speaks to the capture that I was referring to in my opening remark. You will find that there is a competition between the legal instruments we have in Nigeria, electoral legal instruments, struggling to control internal party democracy, while at the same time attempting to allow a measure of autonomy. These two conflict, and this conflict will continue as long as we have persons on the saddle whose only business is politics. And as long as we continue to have persons whose only business is politics, rest assured that they will leave no stone unturned in ensuring the continued manipulation of the system to guarantee their survival. And I dare say, which I always say at many fora, that this return that we are attempting to do requires a measure of consensus from amongst us. And by measure of consensus, I mean that there is the need for us to make the decision, if it is today, to join the process, like I did, to make this sacrifice, like I did and like Sowore is doing, because as long as we are not there, they will give us direction, And as long as they continue to give us direction, we'll wake up one day and your Megad will be the leader that you're not expecting. And I'm very serious about it. And I'm very, very serious about it. So, and the reason is because we just enjoy our comfort as elites, but without any formidable guarantees for the future. And the degeneration and deterioration is ongoing, unaverted. And as long as this continues to grow, the issues of internal party democracy will only remain academic. Because those that have taken over the system, those that have perfected the capture, will continue to ensure that the system remains favorable to them, because they know that once they quit, it will be hellish for them to be able to survive. Now, quickly, I'd like to talk about candidate selection. I am up as one of the candidates that is seeking re-election, and I will tell you that every day I sit down and look at what's going on, I actually do wonder whether I want to go through this process. The reason being that it is a combination of inhuman and impracticable processes that requires you to almost give up yourself, because the weapons of the process of selection, as it is currently under the Electoral Act, are skewed in favor of these people who I've talked about have perfected the capture. And having removed the indirect primaries, which I was a party to, I won my elections under the indirect primaries. And I will tell you that it is worse than the lion's den. It is worse than the lion's den because there is a clear commodification of the process of choosing candidates for political parties. And I felt a bit of relief when the Electoral Act 2026 removed from the Electoral Act the indirect primaries. But yet again, we're being confronted by another monster, which is the consensus option or the indirect primaries. Either way, it is a case of the deep blue sea and the devil, quite frankly. The reason is because the consensus is actually going to be conducted by a couple of wise men. And the wise men have become unreachable, they have become untouchable, and they have become unapproachable. And in the next couple of days, I don't know, maybe either way for me, it's okay. I might be joining my Learned Brothers Silk in court if my week is returned to me to say, well, you know what, just go back to your old work and continue. And the reason this is happening is because you all are not there. All we do is talk at workshops and conferences and seminars like this about how best things can be done. But I can tell you that the way to do it is not easy because they know themselves and they favor themselves. And when the time comes, they know who to pick and who not to pick. And I can tell you that as long as you have only a few of your type there, they will either not survive or continue to fight survival issues. Now, I'd like to add to the pre-election status quo that my Learned Brothers spoke about. There has been an experience in legal electoral jurisprudence over the years as to the subject of interference with internal party business, the subject of the provisions of the Electoral Act, and the subjects of the constitutional provisions. Now, like my little brother Silk said, Section 138 of the new Electoral Act has actually reduced the grounds for election petition. And the two grounds are very clearly the only questions can be raised in an election petition only when there are electoral malpractices or a violation of the provisions of the Electoral Act on the one hand, or on the other hand, that the respondent did not win his election by a majority of the lawful votes cast during the election, leaving out the issue of qualification. Now, that's the provision of section 138. Now, try to juxtapose that with the provisions of section 56, 55, 56, and maybe section 106 and section 107 of the 1999 Constitution as amended. Now, the provisions of these sections that I outlined clearly stated the preconditions upon which a candidate can stand election. Conditions like citizenship, conditions like the minimum academic threshold, conditions like age, which is 25 years for State House of Assembly, and other conditions. Now, I also tried to read the provisions of section 29, subsection 4 and 5 of the Electoral Act. The operative word in section 29, subsection 4 is that any person, that's the operative word, could approach INEC to apply for certified true copies of all the nomination form, the supporting affidavit, and other documents that the candidate for an election may have submitted to INEC. And subsection 5 then went ahead to provide that only aspirants that participated in the primaries of their political parties who have reasonable grounds to believe that the documents submitted by their candidates were false or blah, 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 will approach the Federal High Court to litigate in a pre-election matter. So for me, and I hope that we will be able to find answers today, is so it is not a disqualification is not a pre-election matter, and it's not a post-election matter. So if I'm not a member of a political party that submitted that candidate to INEC, but contesting election with this guy, I believe did not meet the prerequisites provided for in the Constitution. And in the light of the provisions of section 1, subsection 1, and subsection 3 of the 1999 Constitution, will that provision not actually be said to be in violation of the provisions of the 1999 Constitution? Because for me, I'm looking for where to litigate. Yes, I'm looking because I've contested election with someone I know did not qualify under the provisions of the Constitution. And law has said, since he's not of the same political party with me, and I was not an aspirant in his political party, I can't litigate in a pre-election matter. And the grounds for filing electoral petitions have removed qualification. And now it is only on grounds of malpractice and the violation of the provisions of the Electoral Act. So I want to join my learned brother Silk to add to the questions that would be answered by you at today's interaction, so that we can continue to improve the body of our electoral jurisprudence and provide for Nigerians the leaders that they deserve. Thank you so very much.